Welcome to Tracks to Success, brought to you by Presentation Partners. This is the podcast that brings you inspiring people and their inspiring stories. How did they find their way to the top, and how can their path help you do the same? Here's your host, network broadcaster, executive, and entrepreneur, Kraig Can.
Right now on this edition of Tracks to Success, you'll meet a man who saw his long and successful career disappear, only to find a brand new one in his 50s. Raised in rural Georgia, he found his way to a legitimate first job at the age of 16, working as a radio DJ, eventually working in radio stations in the Southeast, and then marketing and distribution of music in, of all retail places, truck stops. And he was killing it. And then it disappeared. Next was his second act that's made him a first-rate authority thanks to a drive and a strategy we can all learn from. He never took things personal. He just got personal and focused on business connections and relationships, and has now become a recognized and sought-after expert in the world of personal and professional branding. You've heard of LinkedIn, right? Approaching 600 million users, with more than 40% using it daily. Well, nobody knows it like this guy, a man who is now actually known as the LinkedIn guy. So how did he become a self-taught expert in social media marketing? What have countless professionals learned from his consulting and speaking services? And how can you really flip the career script at age 50? His name is Gregg Burkhalter. His inspiring story in this edition of Tracks to Success starts now. Well, Gregg, this is going to be a thrill for me, and I think our listeners are going to have a whole lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining me. I've got my pen, I've got paper. I think I'm going to learn something, and I think they're going to learn something. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic, Kraig. And first of all, a couple of comments. Your set looks awesome, man. I can see why you're the pro and I'm the amateur at this video stuff. Great set, and also thank you for the honor of being on your show. I really appreciate it.
No, the pleasure's all mine. I'm really glad to have you. And I was thinking about how best to start this thing. The way I look at this whole podcast is a little bit of self, which is you and your story, and a little bit of self-help for all of those who are listening, because I think they're going to get so much out of this. And I think that's the great part of this story. So your path, your journey, and how you can help others. I'm going to start with a very simple question, although it might not be that easy to answer, but I think you can handle it. Define the word brand.
Brand, your personal brand, is what people think, feel, or say when they hear your name or they see your face or name. That's kind of wordy. That's sort of my definition. Let me cut to the chase. Your brand's not what you say you are. Your brand's what other people say you are. And one of the common questions I get all the time, Gregg, is my LinkedIn profile my brand? Answer to that question is, if nobody believes what's on your profile, it's not your brand. Your goal is to make them believe that what's on your profile is the same person they're going to meet and the same person they're going to work with.
Good stuff. Right there, you've already hit on the key to the whole thing. To me, brand, and what I talk about a lot, is it's not what happens when you're in the room. It's what happens once you leave the room. It's what people will say about you based on what they noticed, based on what they heard, based on what they'll share. Word of mouth marketing bigger than ever today. So you've kind of gone brand, and you've already tied in personal brand. Now what I want you to do is tell me why it's more important than ever to realize that it matters so much.
Well, right now, most first impressions are digital. So the days of being all nervous about going to meet someone for the very first time and trying to make that good first impression, don't worry about that. When you meet someone nowadays, it's at least the second impression. People meet more people online these days than they will ever meet in person. So your personal brand, your online presence, that is the one item that's working for you 24/7, 365. And for most people, it is the first contact they have with you is when they Google your name. In other words, Google's kind of like your Google resume. I mean, you've got a printed resume, but your digital resume that you can control, but it takes longer to kind of get in position, is your Google resume. So your brand precedes you, and your brand can open up so many opportunities for you. In fact, it can change your life and change your career if you have a strategy on how to build a strong personal brand and professional brand. But one thing I learned about branding is I don't take credit for building my brand because I can't build my brand. It takes people around me to do it. So all the credit for my brand building goes to the people around me who believed in me. I will take some small credit for a couple of things. I gave them a concept they could believe in, and I gave them a person they could trust to deliver on it. And once I did that, they started building my brand. And now I'm kind of in a new situation, which I had no idea this would be where I would be, but it's a nice situation with a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
I have to always deliver on my brand promises. So if you think it's a challenge to get well branded, get people believing your brand and you let them down. It's going to be like people jumping off the Titanic. They're never coming back. The other thing about having a strong personal brand, I didn't know this either in the early years, is you can help other people. So if you're one of those individuals who enjoys paying it forward and helping other people, a strong personal brand gives you the power to do that.
Yeah. If you fell off the Titanic and could climb back up and get back up there, you'd have a pretty good story to tell. That would be pretty brand worthy, I would say.
You're right.
You're a speaker, you're a consultant, you're a coach, you help a lot of people. We're going to get into all of that stuff, okay? You are known as the LinkedIn guy, and I'm going to get into that because I think that's pretty cool. I think it's really cool. The reason I think you're an expert in the field of personal branding and business marketing is because of the story that really is yours. I think it's a story that carries. I think it's a story that a lot of people can relate to, which I want to dive into because it really kind of falls into a guy who switched, who pivoted, who changed course and has found success. In other words, your story, based on everything I know and what we've talked about, goes from a guy who started young, had a great career, company goes bankrupt, doesn't have a job, decides I'm going to do something else, and now a career of helping other people to build their story and themselves. Is that a fair assessment?
That is fair, but the one thing I can tell you, a lot of that you just described there was not scripted. I wish I could tell you I had a perfect plan of how things would unfold. I didn't. But I did have a strategy on where I was headed, and I went along and I adjusted and pivoted as needed be to make sure I maintained my momentum. And once I knew I was on the right path, I forged full steam ahead.
Yeah. Forward thinking is a gift, really, and it's not something a lot of people think about. And I actually believe people need to spend a lot more time thinking about plan B, plan C, where they might need to go. Spread your wings now just in case you might need it later, but it doesn't always work that way for most of us. Let's drop back to the path of all this newfound success. In fact, I want to go way back. It begins on a farm in Georgia. If I know this story right, as a young kid, I want you to tell me about who you were way back before you were the LinkedIn guy, because you weren't the LinkedIn kid.
I was a small town boy who did not live on a farm, but all of my friends were farmers. So all the guys I hung out with were farmers. I was sort of quiet, not very talkative, but I had a dream. I wanted to be on the radio one day. In fact, I found a cassette tape about a decade ago of me talking as a teenager at about 13 years old, pretending to be a disc jockey on the fake radio station that never existed in my town called WMEN. And I found that tape. So I thought it was just a passing teen fad. Well, little did I know that my mother was out looking for jobs for me to try to give me something to do after school. The place she went to ask, would you hire my son, was the local radio station. And they said yes. So at 16 years old, I got on the air and began my early career in broadcasting. One of my earliest memories, and this is really going to date me, I actually remember being on the air when Elvis died, hearing the teletype, which most people don't know what a teletype is. It's a digital machine that brought you the news. The teletype alarms were going off. I went into the news booth, found the copy that was printing out, brought it back to the turntable, took the needle off the record, and said, ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Aaron Presley is dead. That's my earliest memory. So I started working at a small town station, got married about 3 or 4 years later, and my wife gave me a boost of confidence. She says, Gregg, where do you really want to work? I gave her a couple of ideas, and I gave her my main idea was a station in Savannah, Georgia, that happened to be a very popular station. And I thought I was not good enough. Well, she encouraged me to send that tape. And I got a phone call from that station, went down for an interview, and they offered me a job. But unfortunately, it was not a full-time job. It was a part-time job until something full-time became available. So I came back to my small town station and begged and pleaded, could I work at both stations at the same time and try to transition to a better career? They didn't like that idea. They said, you've got to choose. You work for us or you work for that new radio station in Savannah. I rolled the dice, went to work for the radio station in Savannah. Probably a month later, I got another great opportunity. That station in Savannah had a 50,000 watt sister station that was starting America's first disco radio show. Guess who they asked to be the host? The farm boy. Okay. So that's how I got my first full-time gig in Savannah. About 6 months later, the FM radio station where I'd originally applied had a full-time opening for the overnight shift. I applied for the overnight shift. My boss told me that I did not get the job at the overnight shift, but he told me, you got middays. We're moving the midday guy to overnight. You're our new midday guy, and we're going to rename you. Your name is now Captain Kraig Stevens. You are the pilot of the airwaves. My career energized at that point. I started dreaming again, sent a tape to the #1 station in Jacksonville, Florida, got a phone call at my mobile home saying, this is the PD at Y103 in Jacksonville. I want to interview you. I thought it was a friend playing a trick on me. So I asked him all these qualifying questions. He got them all right. So I drove to Jacksonville, got my job, came back to Savannah, told my boss he was excited for it. He gave me a going away party. And then he got into Jacksonville. And at that point, my father passed away. And as a young guy, kind of took a little wind out of my sails. So I kind of got uninterested in broadcasting, and I kind of got out of it a little bit. So I made one more career move to Charleston, South Carolina, where I did my last midday show on an FM radio station, and then transitioned into the second part of my career.
All right, hold on a second. I got a question before we get into that second part of your career.
Sure.
Who was more motivated at age 16 when you started doing that stuff on the radio? Because that's like a professional gig in a way. Was it you or was it your mom that was saying, I need to get this guy to the house doing something?
Here's the honest answer to that question. Don't tell anybody. We're not being recorded, are we?
Yeah, right.
The honest answer is my mother was looking for a company that was near my father, who was a teacher's school where he taught. If she could find a business near where he taught school, then he could bring me home from work every day. That radio station was right across the street from the school.
Oh, okay.
So once I got into it, and by the way, you use the term professional. I was far from professional at 16 years old. I remember my first full shift. I had an incredible shift. And it's toward the latter part of my shift. The boss walks in. He asked me how my gig's going. I said, man, it's wonderful. He goes, do you realize you've been off the air for the last 2 hours? He says, you see that switch on the right corner of the board? You must have flipped it off. I've heard nothing for 2 hours. So I was far from pro. But it got better one thing about broadcasting, I was never the strongest link at the radio station, but the stations where I was able to work, there were some incredibly talented people there. And just like in life, the people around you make you better. So they made me sound better.
Hey, Gregg, little tidbit for you. When it comes to brand awareness and recognition, you got to have the switch on at the radio station for people to be able to hear you if you're trying to do that. I just wanted to toss that out at you.
See, the phone never rang anyway, so how do I know the difference?
Okay, now let's get into part two of the career, because this is actually one of the ones that I find to be a little bit more even interesting. I mean, you and I have the ties to broadcasting, which is great, but now we're talking about music distribution, sales, marketing, the whole thing, and I find this a little bit fascinating.
Okay. The next part of the story begins in Charleston, South Carolina, when I started working for one of America's largest music retail chains. I did that to get my foot into the music industry. I worked in Charleston. I worked in Montgomery, Alabama. I worked in Birmingham, Alabama. My goal was always to get to Atlanta. I always wanted to be in the music business in Atlanta. Finally got that happen to me, and probably, I think it was in the late 80s, early 90s. I got to Atlanta, and I had my first opportunity to get into what I call the real music world. The real music world is when you get away from retail and selling music to hanging out with recording artists, being able to buy music on massive scales, being able to be catered to by the major record labels. I got into wholesale music. It changed my life. Did that in Atlanta for a few years, and then I made a pivot slightly to another facet of wholesale music. That was, I became the guy, the one person in the Southeastern US who made most of the decisions about what music goes into those little spinner racks that you would see at convenience stores and truck stops across America. I decided what went in those racks for pretty close to 25 years. It was my dream job. It was what I always wanted to do. Like I said, I got to hang out with recording stars day in and day out. I had a lot of power in the buying department. So that means the major labels were catering to me. I saw all your major artists in their early years, like Garth Brooks, Celine Dion. I've been on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. It's just been an incredible thing. But you know what? About 6 years ago, that blissful job that I love so much went kaput. The company went bankrupt. And you had a guy, where I was at that point, a guy, talk about brand. I only had one brand. I was the music guy. But I realized that the music industry going forward doesn't have a whole lot of upward mobility because of downloading and streaming. So I had to make a pivot. A friend of mine, about 10 years younger than me, came to the rescue. But before he started talking to me, he actually apologized. So I knew this was going to be a very sensitive topic. He said to me, Gregg, please don't take this wrong, but I need to help you. You need to have some strategy on what to do to make this next move. So I went to his house and I left with two bits of strategy. One was I needed a networking card printed up that looked like I had a job. The other thing was, you said, you got to be on LinkedIn. By the way, I was on no social media at that time. I didn't even know what the word networking meant. So I got the card printed up, which was a networking card, walked into the first business I saw, which was a digital marketing company, walked inside, said, I'm looking for a job, and here's my networking card. And can either one of you tell me exactly what networking is? And I could tell their lips were twitching. They were holding back, busting out laughing. They're like, this guy is clueless. And they felt sorry for me. So they stopped everything in the lobby and we talked for 2 hours. And when I left there, I had a job as a digital marketing consultant. And I was so excited. I called my buddy up to tell him what just happened. And he was not excited. He threw that question at me that always made me stammer. He goes, Gregg, are you on LinkedIn yet? I said, no, I'm afraid of LinkedIn. I don't want to be on social media. I've never been on social media. I'm a private person. I don't want to be on LinkedIn. He says, Gregg, out of respect for you, I'm going to force you to get on LinkedIn. I'm going to set up your account.
So he's the guy. He's the guy that actually did that. But hold on. You're going so fast on this story. I got questions for you, Gregg.
Sure.
I mean, you're not exactly 32 getting kicked to the curb, having a company go bankrupt, right? You're later in your career. So this is when a lot of people, right, go sideways. They lose themselves. They feel lost. They get nervous. They don't know what their next is. And you kind of shared that. So you basically had not only not an understanding of social networks or marketing digital in that way, you didn't have a network to lean on. Come on. Were you scared to death?
I didn't know enough to be scared. I was just in a funk. I was at a place where I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know where the go button was. And this friend of mine, when he reached out to me, if he thinks he knows how to help, please try to help me. So he set up my account. And when I left his kitchen table, I didn't really have much confidence, but I did have a strategy from day one. And you know what? It was right from day one. But I didn't know that till later on. My strategy was, could I build and nurture relationships online like I do in person? Fast forward 1 year, I'm doing my normal LinkedIn stuff. I've never met one person I could talk to about LinkedIn other than my friend, and he only minorly knew it at the time. So I kept doing what I thought was right. And I get my very first indicator, something magical is going on here. When one of the larger chambers in the Atlanta area sends me an email, by the way, I don't belong to the chamber. I was wondering why they were writing me. Sent me a note and said, Gregg, we're starting a brand new education academy. Would you come be our very first speaker and do a LinkedIn workshop? I went, they must have the wrong Gregg. So I wrote him back and I said, please check your address book. You must have chosen the wrong Gregg. I am not a member of your chamber. They immediately responded and said, we've been watching your activity on LinkedIn. We think you're the guy that knows LinkedIn. Would you come do it for us? So at that point, it felt like the story was being built. The question was, did I have enough confidence to go where nobody had been before? Could I do something that wasn't even on the roadmap Okay. So I played around for about 3 months to see, is there a possibility that I might become somewhat of an authority on LinkedIn? So in June 2015, I decided I'm going to roll the dice. I am going for this. So I walked into my boss at that marketing company and I said, I'm going to be the LinkedIn guy. He goes, what's a LinkedIn guy? And I explained to him what I plan to do. And boy, his smile gets bigger and bigger. And then I say, as the LinkedIn guy, I control my brand. So you're not going to have access to it all the time. Well, that didn't go over too well. So in June 2015, the guy you're talking to, the LinkedIn guy, was born. And that first year, let me tell you, it was amazing. I spoke to 75 to 100 groups, and I was immediately starting to train C-suite executives all across America. That first year, amazing.
How did you do this when you basically didn't even know what you were doing? In other words, there are a lot of people who say, okay, this is what I want to do next. This is going to be my passion, but I might have to have a learning curve. I might have to go to a couple of training sessions myself. I might have to go to a couple of conferences. I might have to read a few books, all of that sort of stuff. I mean, you went from, kind of being on the road at truck stops and with truckers to being, on the road or on the map with everybody in this huge landscape without a compass in a way.
What I recognized early on is even the little that I knew about LinkedIn, it was more than most people I ever encountered knew about LinkedIn. So I knew I was ahead of them. Mm-hmm. So as long as I was ahead of them and I was willing to share content, then I could build my business. And what I learned early on is, like I told you in our first part of this conversation, I don't control my brand. And I knew the way I could build some social proof and some brand traction was to speak as often as I could. So if somebody would give me an opportunity to speak, I would be there, because I knew if I spoke there, I could get a photo of the group and I could put that on LinkedIn with a thank you to the host who brought me in. And people would say, wow, people are sitting around listening to him. He must know what he. Doing that for the early part of my career built social proof. And I didn't know this at the time, but every time I was speaking to a group, they would talk about it on their social media, on their website. They never took it down. So my digital footprint goes all the way back to my early years as the LinkedIn guy. When you Google my name, you will go through 10 pages of Google results before you ever leave me, which means my website has tremendous SEO because of the quality of backlinks pointing to it. Again, this was not planned. Mm-hmm. It just happened to be that the more you speak and the more it's documented digitally, the more your digital footprint is.
Absolutely. So that part I totally understand. And a lot of people don't realize that you've got to put yourself out there to be recognized and relevant in certain spaces. You became the authority in something. The LinkedIn guy is a very powerful statement. I mean, it really is. Has LinkedIn embraced you? Was there any issues at the very beginning when everybody's seeing your name attached to LinkedIn? You don't work for them. Were there any trademark issues or what happened with that? There had to be.
Okay, well, you don't know this because you haven't seen my business card. My business card does not say the LinkedIn guy. And when you look at my LinkedIn profile, it doesn't say I am the LinkedIn guy. It just says I'm known by many as the LinkedIn guy. So what people call me, I can't control. And I've embraced what they call me. They say I'm the LinkedIn guy. You know a LinkedIn guy? Yeah, I'm the LinkedIn guy. So I embrace that. Yes, I'm concerned. What would Microsoft think about, or what would LinkedIn think about me being the LinkedIn guy? And when I got my first indicator about how many years ago was it? Right before, about 1 year into my LinkedIn guy use, I found out that Microsoft bought LinkedIn. And that scared me to death. In fact, I'm sitting here at this desk and I'm actually having an anxiety attack because I'm concerned what's going to happen. Well, I'm hoping Microsoft, being they bought LinkedIn, maybe doesn't know about me. Well, that's not the case, because that very same day, I got my very first email from Microsoft.com, and it scared me so bad. I sat here for about an hour to get up the guts to read it. When I read it, it was not with two eyes. It was one eye open, and it was a slow scroll. And what it said was that Microsoft had officially purchased LinkedIn, and they were asking me a favor. They wanted to know, would I come to the Microsoft store in Atlanta and do a workshop for Microsoft? I went, you got to be kidding me. You know me? So not only do we know you, corporates approve you. So the Microsoft relationship goes a little further. I've been to Microsoft 4 times to train their people. Most recently, I did a regional webinar for 65 people of their sales team out of the corporate office in Atlanta, Georgia. So Microsoft knows who I am, but I believe there's a mutual respect. And LinkedIn as a company does not have an office in Atlanta. I'm not sure where the closest office is, but I would say in LinkedIn, my footprint and what I'm doing and the activity I'm doing has kept the LinkedIn name alive until they can get here. So because LinkedIn was not here and they didn't have a corporate presence, that also helped me grow my brand faster because I was not competing with a corporate giant.
Hey everybody, I really want to tell you about Ahead, one of our new partners this season and now the official headwear provider of Tracks to Success. Creativity, a sharp look, dozens of styles to choose from. Ahead's been supplying the most prestigious events and outfitting the world's top golfers for 25 years, and it's perfect for you as well. So if you're looking to dress for success, make sure you think Ahead. Here's your chance to save big. Visit aheadusashop.com now and use the code TTSPOD. That's TTSPOD and receive 20% off your purchase. Ahead, the finest in headwear, the official headwear of the Tracks to Success podcast, and available at aheadusashop.com. All right, I know how you felt at 50. You said you weren't scared because you didn't know any better. Since you're now that guy, and since you've made that pivot, and since it is a success, number one, hats off to you. I think it's beyond impressive. And by the way, I'm sure nobody's ever told you this. You bring a little bit of energy to the entire conversation. Let's help some people. All right. I'm gonna ask you some quick questions for some fairly quick answers. Here we go. Number one, why is LinkedIn so important today?
I just alluded to one of the reasons Microsoft owns LinkedIn. So you can fully expect LinkedIn to be incorporated into the whole Microsoft Office environment. Also, I alluded to earlier that your first impression that people have of you is digital. So if you want to see how valuable LinkedIn is, go to Google and search for your name. 9 times out of 10, the first website you're going to see above your company page and everything else is your LinkedIn profile.
Okay. First thing people need to focus on when building that page for themselves. The first thing they need to attack. What do?
First, they have to realize that as a general rule, nobody's looking for you on LinkedIn. They discover you. So you got to be discoverable. And initially, people only see 3 things when they see your profile. They see your face, they see your name, and they see the words below your name, which is your headline. That is the first thing they see. Also, what you're trying to do on your LinkedIn profile, once they click on it, you want them to have a conversation with you and not be a real world. It's more of a digital conversation. You want your words to be on that page. So you can tell them the value you bring to any situation, where your heart is, what your passion is, what your goals are. Talk to your people digitally. Your online brand is out there 24/7, 365. It better be rocking.
Yeah. I coach presentation skills for people that stand in front of audiences. And I always talk because people, Greg, they try to be perfect. They try to give a speech. And I say, we're not giving a speech. We're giving an experience. We want people to feel something. It's got to come from your head and your heart. That's what makes people walk out the door emotionally charged, excited, going to share it with other people. And social media to me is much the same way. You've got to be a storyteller of the things that are tied to you. So based upon what you said, if you got to be discoverable, the question would then be, how do you get noticed?
You get noticed by building that digital footprint, like I told you about. You got to be out there among other people. You got to be engaged digitally. In fact, speaking of being engaged digitally, one of my talking points when I speak is this. I don't know if you've recognized this, but the Professional Toolbox has changed in the last few years. When I came along, my Professional Toolbox was a little skinny thing like you could buy at Radio Shack. And it had 2 items in it. It had my education and where I've worked. That was the 2 items in it. Well, right now, everybody has a massive toolbox. This thing has 2 new power tools in it that can change your life and can change your career. Those power tools are a solid personal brand and what we were just talking about, an engaged professional network. I don't care how many connections you have on LinkedIn. If they are not aware of you and they're not engaging with you, then you are not connected with those people truly. So you've got to always be strategizing. How do you build and nurture those relationships? Mm-hmm. By the way, LinkedIn, there's no shortcut to LinkedIn success. If you think you can buy your way to long-term success, you can't, because relationships are the foundation of long-term success. So if all you're doing on LinkedIn is hunting for a customer and trying to take a shortcut, you might have some wins along the way. But when that hunting stops, your brand has not moved 1 inch. Your brand growth is built on relationships and adding value to the LinkedIn community.
Okay, so most people are probably afraid to brag. You know, they look at their page like, oh boy, I don't want to put this on there, I don't want to put that on there. But they also understand that there have to be keywords used, et cetera, that show up in searches and whatnot. What's the biggest philosophical mistake that people make with their page?
First of all, they talk in third person. What makes a LinkedIn profile different than a resume is one thing: emotion. I can make you feel something. I can make you feel something with my words and with my photos. So if I look at your LinkedIn profile right now and I ask myself, does your profile look more like a newspaper article or a magazine article? If I say newspaper article, I am bored to death. This is a multimedia world. I better see photos. I better see videos. I better see something to excite me. And I don't want copy paste paragraphs from your resume, because over half of everyone who sees your LinkedIn profile for the very first time sees it on a mobile device. And if your profile is written in long paragraphs, I feel like I just clicked on Wikipedia. It's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So you've got to do more of a bullet point, highlighting stuff, make it more easily digestible. But again, what you're trying to do is get people to feel the person they're going to meet when they finally meet that person. When those two things match, your profile and the in-person you're in a sweet spot.
You've said it's not who you know or what you know, but who knows you, correct? That's one of Gregg's things he focuses on. Can you explain that?
Well, I don't care how many real world relationships you have, how many people you know shake hands and tell jokes to and slap each other on the back. Those are all fine and well. But if you haven't taken your relationships and put them into the digital workday of people who like you, potential clients, people who admire you, if you haven't got your brand in their workday, they don't think about you. So if you have a network of 1,000 people that have never heard from you, those 1,000 people never think about you during the workday. You're invisible. So you've got to always be making yourself in front of people. And you're not putting yourself in front of people as a braggart. You're putting yourself in front of people as someone who always brings value, someone that always has time to turn that helpful ear to try to help someone, puts people first. Be a giver on LinkedIn, give value, give humble advice, be open to learning from things around you and individuals around you, and you will grow your brand. And also you will grow your respect from your peers in the community.
Gregg, a lot of people don't know what value really means. They don't believe that they truly have value. They don't understand their inner strength, their inner genius, or whatever. So they're afraid to post. They're afraid to put stuff out there. So I hear that phrase all the time. Got to add value. Heck, I use it. What's value?
Value is an item that's of the beholder. Not what you perceive as value, but what the person who you're engaging with would perceive as value. Value is not something that raises your cause. Value is something that answers your question for the other person or raises their brand. On LinkedIn, your goal is not number one to build your brand. Your number one goal is to build relationships and help others build their brand. By you doing that, it creates a relationship of respect, and they're going to turn around and do the favor for you. They're going to help you build your brand. And one of the things I learned early on when you're starting to build your brand from scratch is it takes a while to build it from scratch if you're trying to blaze your own trail. But if you find people in your LinkedIn community that you know who are well branded, people you respect, if you will help those people get their brand even bigger, you create massive exposure for your brand that you couldn't come up with on your own for 6 months to a year. So help others, well branded, you can ride their coattail to even wider brand exposure.
Season 2 of Tracks to Success is brought to you by Presentation Partners. Presentation Partners is a unique team of award-winning executives helping you build a presentation others will be talking about. Presentation Partners teaches you the true art of storytelling. And if you haven't heard about their neuroscience of persuasion, you'll see how valuable it is to own it. Whether you're a company or an entrepreneur, Presentation Partners is the team you need behind you. For almost 15 years, they've helped clients raise millions in capital and countless dollars in sales simply by making top leaders successful presenters. The time is now to find your authentic voice and learn your authentic story. Presentation Partners, creating persuasive story presentations based on something other than just your good looks. I've heard you use the catchphrase brand storming. All right. I think that's kind of funny, kind of cool. So could you take me through in, 35, 45 seconds what a brand storming session is all about? Does it include like differentiators or strengths and weaknesses? What is that?
Basically, when somebody reaches out to me, they'll say, "Hey, Greg, could you take a look at my LinkedIn profile and give me some feedback?" What I tell that person initially is, I'm not going to look at your profile until we talk. Step one of brainstorming is hearing that person tell me in their own words, what do they think their brand is? And once I go through that 10-minute conversation for the very first time, I look at their LinkedIn profile and I tell them, do I believe their brand or don't believe their brand based on what I see on their LinkedIn profile? Once I figure out the points of that profile that are not connecting with the person that I just spoke with, we start the brainstorming session of deciding, is what you told me not truly your brand? Did you not represent it well? Is your brand more like your profile, or is what I heard your brand? If it is, we're going to kind of brainstorm on how we can present you on LinkedIn in such a way that when somebody comes to your profile, they can start believing and buying into your brand. Brainstorming is a painful process. It's a process most people can't do on their own because one reason is they can't be objective. Mm-hmm. But I have the ability to look at someone's profile and listen to their story and tell them what 90% of the people who see them on LinkedIn think and feel. That's one of my attributes. And that's something I use all the time. In fact, when I get off of this podcast, someone contacted me 10 minutes before we started asking for that exact same thing, but they didn't know the term. Their term was, they said, would you look at my profile and tell me if you feel I have professional strength and am I of value in this market nowadays?
Yeah.
They just asked me to analyze their brand and do a little brand. So I'm going to brainstorm with them later.
Yeah. Brand analysis. Tough thing. And I don't think people necessarily know who they are or what value they truly bring. I've been asked that question. Somebody says, Kraig, who are you? What do you do? What does Can Advisory Group do? I say, we're elevators. We elevate people to become better. We elevate brands to become bigger. We elevate events to become grander. Come along for the ride. We get people talking. All that stuff. You have to have the answers to who you are or what you are. And in the LinkedIn page, I think you need to be able to share it with people, as you say, not third person, but find a way to connect with people. Am I on track?
You're on track. And let me tell you something. One of the most important parts on your LinkedIn profile, and the one that's misused a lot, is the words below your name. It's called the headline. Most people have never adjusted the words below their name. And if you've never adjusted those words, I know what's there. It's your latest job title. And let me tell you this, if you believe your personal brand is tied to your job, you're setting yourself up for a major brand reset like I did when I left my job. Mm-hmm. Your brand is not where you work. Your brand is the skills and attributes not only do you bring to where you currently work, but what you would bring to a future employer or situation in the future. So your headline should be more than just your job title. Tell me some of your strengths. Tell me what your focus is. Make me feel something about your direction and why I should engage with you. One of the big mistakes I see on the headline also too is people ask me, how is my brand? Am I building my personal brand? One of the early warning signs that you're tying your brand too closely to your company is when I look at your headline and I see the company you work for, which by the way, you don't own it, it's a difference. But if you don't own the company and I see your company name within the first 3 or 4 words of your headline, when you lose that job there, you're going to take a hit. Mm-hmm. So make sure your headline talks about your transferable value, soft skills, hard skills, motivation. Just tell me about you and put it in your headline and get that job title out of there.
I totally agree. You and I could travel together. You could come be a part of my workshops. Maybe I could be a part of yours. I say that all the time. The minute you put the company first, that's your experience. That's the experience. That's your resume. It's not you. It's not who you are. It's not what you offer. It's to whom you're offering it at the current time. And if you do that, you're cutting your legs out from under you before you even get started in a conversation. I find that to be very, very interesting. In one of my workshops, we do this thing where we get people in small groups, 3 or 4 people. And then I have them write down exactly what they believe their greatest values, here we go with that word again, values and strengths are that they offer the organization. They write it down. They don't show it to anybody. Then when they're done, the other people in the group share what they believe the strengths are of that person. And then what's interesting is if there's commonalities there, then that one person who wrote down their own all of a sudden go, okay, I guess I know where my strengths and weaknesses are. I guess this really is who I am because this is what people say about me or think about me. And I don't think a lot of people know what their differentiator actually is or what sets them apart. And all of a sudden, they lose a job or they get furloughed or they get laid off and they don't even know where to begin.
Correct. I would recommend something, I call it the 3 Ds of branding. If you want to start the process, the first D is define your brand. So the 3 Ds, define your brand. Google your name, see what's out there, and then kind of gauge that. Mm-hmm. Then also reach out to people around you. What do they say about you? What are the words they're using? Decide. So take what you see, take what they say, and define your brand. Then you got to develop a strategy to grow your brand. Okay. The strategy should be, what am I going to do in person and online to grow my brand? In person, you're going to network. So when you're in person networking, talking about your company name, one of the big mistakes I see when people are networking is this. You go meet someone for the very first time. They're only going to remember 4 things about you: your name, what you do, your face, and your company name. Guess what a lot of people lead the conversation with? Their company name. Don't do that. Lead with the other stuff, your face, your name, what you're about. Make that emotional connection. The company name will follow. So again, define your brand, develop a strategy to grow your brand, including LinkedIn. And the 3rd D, we alluded to this earlier, once you get your brand solidly in place, you enter the last stage. And it's the work stage you will do from now until you quit working. It's deliver on your brand promises. So always deliver.
I find, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, I think people are nervous about what their boss, the CEO, or the company might think about them building, quote unquote, or taking their brand to another level, putting themselves out there as an industry thought leader or sharing various things like they're the expert. They're fearful they might lose their job. And to me, any CEO or boss worth anything as a leader should want the people that work for them to raise their own level. That only helps the company. The bigger the person is, the better the company is. If they're recruitable, that's a positive. It shows you're bringing value to the company. You agree with that?
I'll agree. Personal branding, helping your employees get well branded, is part of professional development these days. In fact, one of the things that's changed in the last decade is your customer and future employees don't really believe the company message anymore. What do they believe? They believe the employees of your company and the customers of your company. So if you're trying to recruit and hire quality employees and you want your customers to believe the values and the culture your company has, the only way you can deliver on that is your employees. Your employees are your brand ambassadors. In fact, the employees of a company have 10 times more followers than the company does. And when an employee does something on social media or engages with a company post or something, they get 500% more exposure than the company could. So employee branding is a major part of corporate success. And if you'll notice, Kraig, a lot of your CEOs now who are working for very successful public companies, they've come out of the unbranded closet and they're out there building and presenting their brand every day. Right. And those companies are some of the most successful we have. So the days of being digitally silent, they're over, both from a career perspective and from growing your brand for yourself and your company.
In addition to hosting this podcast, Kraig leads the CAN Advisory Group, focused on elevating communication for companies and individuals. Company consulting, empowering team and individual workshops, mind-altering webinars, and Kraig's inspiring keynotes for your conference or company meeting. They're all on the menu of services. CAN Advisory helps companies clarify their message, helps professionals build and showcase their brand, and helps everyone present their best selves. So if you're the leader of a team or company looking to give your employees a game-changing one-day experience, or an individual who wants to become a speaker and presenter that gets other people talking, visit canadvisory.com. And when you do connect, make sure to mention the Tracks to Success podcast to receive a special discount on any of the Can Advisory services. That's canadvisory.com. Now back to the interview.
Give you 4 choices here. The best way to use LinkedIn is what? A, build a network. B, post your success stories. C, put your resume out there for other people to discover. D, something I haven't said.
Something you haven't said. Build relationships. Try to help other people first, which leads to the first thing you said, build a network. Also, do you want to share content that shows you as an authority? Yes, you do. Do you want to start out with that as your number one LinkedIn strategy? No, you don't. Here's why. Say, for example, you're not active on LinkedIn and you hear this interview between us two today and you say, you know what, I'm going to get on LinkedIn and I'm going to start showing how much I know. Well, if you've not been active on LinkedIn and all of a sudden I see you sharing these articles and videos showing how much you know, my first thought is, who is this person? Because I've never seen you before. And what it really feels like, it feels like someone walking into an in-person networking event, passing out their business card and their flyer and leaving the room without speaking. It feels weird. So you've got to ease your way into LinkedIn. Step 1, build relationships. Step 2, start trying to find some content and links to share. And you never really get full steam as to full exposure on LinkedIn and full activity. It's going to take you 90 days to 120 days. You've got to ease your way into it. And then once you get your system down, the real secret to LinkedIn, couple of things. One is authenticity. People have to believe what you're saying and what you're doing matches the person they know. And also, just as important, is consistency. If you get on LinkedIn with the attitude, I'm going to try it for 90 days, don't even try it. LinkedIn is not a trial platform. LinkedIn is an all-in platform. I'm going to use LinkedIn. I'm going to build relationships. I'm going to grow my network. I'm going to help other people. I'm going to bring value to the community. And my business, as a result of doing this, is going to grow.
Talking with Gregg Burkhalter. He is the LinkedIn guy, and he is sharing some great stuff with us. Gregg, how important is it to post, be it blogs or video or maybe video messages? How important is that? Because I think a lot of people say, all right, I've got a great page. Let me just let it sit there. How engaged do you really have to be?
As I alluded to earlier, posting is not the number one thing you do. But once you get your legs, your LinkedIn legs, and you get your relationship building, your network building going, then you start doing some posting of stuff. But on LinkedIn, you don't have to be a writer or somebody who's wonderful with videos and words to be able to start building your brand exposure. There's so much quality content in the digital world. There's value in being a curator of quality content. In fact, if Kraig, you've only begun to follow me in the last month or so, once you see my content, you'll see a lot of my content is curated content, but it's not the same old stuff you see everywhere else. I take a lot of pride in knowing resources where I can find the good stuff. So I don't do a lot of writing. Most of my writing is done like we're doing right now. I do verbal interviews. I do my stuff like that. But when it comes to sharing content, I find quality articles, interject my thoughts on that article, but I do a lot of that stuff. And I spend most of my other time, instead of sitting here writing a 3-hour blog post, I spend those 3 hours helping other people and building relationships. That is what guarantees my long-term success, not me writing a blog post and neglecting everybody.
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about you following me. You're going to be analyzing my LinkedIn page every other day. That makes me kind of edgy.
See, one thing you should know, I am the LinkedIn guy, or at least they say I am, but also once you connect with me, I'm the LinkedIn police. Okay, just
am I getting pulled over? Am I okay? Have you scoured my profile in the last 24 hours?
You get a courtesy warning message inside of LinkedIn, okay?
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. What's the biggest thing you've learned from all the, consulting that you've done, be it one-on-one or in groups, something that people just don't understand, like something that gets repeated every time you're in front of people that you keep hearing over and over that you're like, man, people just don't get it.
Well, most people think, as we said earlier, that when I say you need to get more active on LinkedIn, they go, yeah, I'm not really posting as much as I should. So that's probably one of the number one things. But from an executive level and some of the clients I coach, what I've noticed is no matter how elite anyone's position is or how entry level their position is, we all need support and encouragement for other people. And we also need a second set of eyes and ears to give us some input, because there's a lot of noise out there. And no matter how successful someone has been in their career, chances are great going forward, there's going to be a bump in the road. And when that bump in the road happens, that bump is hard to get over by yourself sometimes. Mm-hmm. So hopefully you're building a network of supporters that are going to be there, like the gentleman was for me, with advice on how I can move forward. Because we're all in this together. We none have the right answer. The career path is no longer straight anymore. Everybody's going to get laid off. Everybody's going to lose it. That's just the way the career works now. So don't take it personally. Look at it as an opportunity to maybe make a pivot or to transition into an area that might seem fearful to you right now. But once you take that step of confidence, it might change your career. If I had not taken that step into the path where people kept saying, can he make a living doing this? Who's going to hire? I went down the path where nobody believed. That told me that if I went down that path and it worked, I would be so far ahead of anyone else. By the time copycats came along, I would be well out there. So I kept moving and going. And I knew after about a year in, if this was going to work, I'm telling you.
Yeah. I only have a couple more minutes left with you. You and I both speak. You and I both consult. You and I are both in front of audiences. What is it that you love most now about this kind of new career and this new opportunity?
The fact that I have the ability to impact people's lives. I really don't even realize how many people's lives I might have impacted, because I'm sort of like a radio station. I'm always broadcasting information. I'm always giving advice, but like a radio station, less than 1% of the people that listen call in a request. So I never really know who I'm impacting out there. But I hear just enough feedback from people who I think I've not had any impact on. They'll reach out and just make my lip drop. So the fact that I'm having impact on other people's lives and encouraging people when they get to that mid-career or latter career, when they hit that first roadblock, to say, you know what, there is hope. If you build your brand and you grow your network and you step forward with some confidence and trust and just keep moving forward, good things can happen. And if they don't, reassess and we'll do something else. Changing strategies or pivoting a little does not affect your career brand like it used to. It's not the same thing. You don't want to stay at the same company for 30 years. In fact, right now, the advice to people who are just entering the workforce is not to stay at a company for a long time. They will tell you you have to move around to increase your money and your exposure to opportunities to learn. So for someone in the mid-career like me or latter career, I just alluded to a point there that's very important. I'm going to stress it for you. You got to always be learning. If you're in transition right now and you're looking for work, or maybe you're thinking about changing careers, or you're hoping to hold your edge in your current career, if you're not learning and maintaining your professional curve, you're not going to get there. Continual learning is one of the strongest attributes of a successful career now.
Who's been your biggest influencer in all this? Who lit the fire?
Who lit the fire? I would say something I had inside I didn't know was an incredible desire to help other people. I didn't know that, but LinkedIn brought it out of me. And once it brought it out of me, it allowed me to build confidence, because I saw that when you help other people and you share yourself with them to make them better, it creates a impact that really can't be measured. And experiencing that time and time again, that is what it is. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed giving to people. If I give first with the right heart, not expecting anything, the rewards come back multifold. They might not come back in 2 weeks. They might be 2 years, but let me tell you, they come back.
This podcast is called Tracks to Success. We've heard your story and how you got to where you are, which is quite interesting. I'm a big book reader on things that I think can help me and help me help others. So I want to do that a little bit. One of the books that I read that I think is terrific is actually co-authored by one of the founders of LinkedIn, which is Reid Hoffman. And the book is called The Startup of You. I bring this up because I think a lot of people who might be listening here don't even know how to start, right? Or where to start. What's the first step?
Yep. I can tell you the first step for me would be talk to people around you. Have a good heart-to-heart conversation with someone you trust. That's the first step.
That's pretty good. I know this. I trust you. Anything else I've left off the table that you want to share to our audience before we depart? This has been fantastic. I've loved every bit of it.
I'm going to repeat the gratitude and say, thank you, Kraig. I'm so happy that you and I connected. I look forward to being around you and helping you and maybe even working with you in the future. To your listeners out there, thanks for your attention today. And if I can ever help any of you in any way, please Google the LinkedIn guy. You should find me top of Google. I would love to hear from you.
I was just going to say, Gregg, thank you so much. And I know exactly where I can find you. I think I could probably find you on LinkedIn.
You can.
So that's that. And I guess now I got to go try to find the Twitter guy and the Instagram guy and the Facebook guy. So I don't know. I don't think they'll have your energy. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I truly appreciate you being a part of this.
Thanks again, Kraig, and you have a nice afternoon, sir.
In our conversation, Gregg talked about the line, "It's not who you know or what you know, it's who knows you," which leads me to my one last thing. If you want to be an influencer, start thinking about how you present yourself on social media, and specifically focus on the value you share with each and every post. Being known isn't the most important thing, it's being knowable because of the expertise you present and the thought leadership you put forward. Building a brand isn't about ego or making people believe you're a big deal. It's about carving out your own niche and being known for something and giving people that something they can use and feel connected to. Millions are spending time trying to get noticed on social media with their posts or professional achievements. To me, it's doing things that are worthy of attention that's important, actually not trying to get noticed. Gregg shared some great tips on building a bigger brand, but what stands out to me is the commitment he made to learning something, sharing a lot, helping others, and showing people that it's never too late to find your greatest gift and then doing something with it for the greater good. If you do that, you'll get recognized too, and you'll quickly be on the tracks to success. Do me a favor, by the way, please take a moment, write a review, and rate this podcast. And if you have a guest you think I need to have on the show, email me at info@canadvisory.com. Until next time, I'm Kraig Can. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Tracks to Success, brought to you by Presentation Partners, visual storytellers passionate about connecting presenters with their audience. Don't forget to subscribe to the show for more great interviews and thoughts on reaching your highest personal and professional summit. You can follow Kraig on Twitter and Instagram using the handle @KraigCan. And for exclusive Tracks to Success content and news about our upcoming guests, you can find Tracks to Success on Twitter. It's @Tracks to Success.